welcome to PalPulse Live. My name is Faris. I'm your host today, and we will be joined by the one and only Nima Akram, founder, CEO, chairman, director of NewsCord, the platform that sorts facts from fiction, points out biases of mainstream media and reporting on Palestine and other issues globally. It's been a while. Hope everyone's doing well. We are kind of trying to come back into the rhythm of things. We've been working on a few things behind the scenes, and so kind of neglected this particular aspect of what we're trying to do here at PalPulse. But we're back. I think we might be doing this kind of weekly, semi-weekly, around this time, 8 p.m. GMT, 9 p.m. British summertime, and whatever corresponding time in your particular time zone. Today we'll be discussing quite a few things. We'll be starting with the famine that's been declared in Gaza. Hasn't been talked about. Apparently the sound is low. Does that make it any better? I hope so. Is the sound better now? Dun, dun, dun. How about now? Has that done anything? Testing, 1, 2, 3. Is the sound any better now? Can you hear me? If you can, please let me know. If you can't, please let me know. Okay, brilliant. Well, before we get started, a word from our sponsor. Well, we don't have a sponsor, but if you would like to sponsor us, feel free to reach out. We won't say no to money as long as it comes with no strings attached, because we are not for sale. Now, as I was saying earlier, today we will be joined by Nima Akram, founder and director of NewsCord, the platform which has been invaluable in sorting fact from fiction, especially when it comes to Gaza and elsewhere globally. We'll be discussing many topics throughout our evening here with each other, and we'll be exploring the biases and possibly the lies that have been spread by Western mainstream media. And it seems as though Nima has joined us now. So welcome, Nima.
Hello. Thanks for having me again. How are you doing?
Brilliant. It's been a while. How you doing? How's life?
Yeah, good. Been busy with NewsCode as always. Just keep trying to improve the platform wherever we can. But yeah, it's been amazing to be here.
How's the stuff going with NewsCord these days?
Yeah, so as you know, just for the listeners to know as well, we've got our social media presence, but also we're trying to build like a platform to try to reclaim the narrative and kind of be the place that encourages media literacy, shows people all of the perspectives from the media, from local outlets to major outlets, mainstream, and try to like unravel that using artificial intelligence. So we've got an app recently been focusing a lot on having like browser plugins so that whilst you're on the BBC, it will literally tell you, okay, this is a diverging narrative, this is misleading information. So try to like point it out to you wherever you are, and make it as easy as possible. So yeah, we're seeing good usage on the app. It's been received well. So yeah, that's where a lot of our focus is right now.
Okay, brilliant. So we've got quite a few things to get through today. We'll be focusing mostly on Palestine, but we will be touching on the developments in India and Pakistan. Let's start with Palestine, though. The first thing you wanted to discuss was the officially declared famine in Gaza and how there's not been any coverage.
Yeah, so this is something I'm working on right now to publish a piece on, and yes, it's been well over 24 hours now, and there's not been a peep from Western media about the Israeli caused famine in Gaza. And it's quite astounding, really, because yeah, it's been 18 months or maybe even 19 months now of heavily, in the beginning, heavily restricted aid coming in, and then obviously for over 3 months now, it's been completely cut off by Israel. And when we say aid, I think aid sometimes actually could be a bit misleading, because actually what it includes is food and water. So like these are necessities. It's not just like sometimes I don't know about you, but when I hear aid, it's more like medical aid or something to help you or boost you. Actually, it's like critical supplies or things that a human needs to survive. So they've not had this for 3 months, and obviously you've seen on the news. This isn't mainstream covered, but you've seen where there's been looting now by people who have become obviously desperate for food and stuff. And actually, we've been seeing that it looks like Israel has been helping these looting groups as well, which obviously exacerbates the problem, makes it even worse. Um, and you've seen obviously the price of food skyrocketing to crazy, obviously non-reasonable amounts, which is obviously understandable. But yeah, now finally it seems like they've officially declared a state of famine. And yeah, you've got the Intercept covers it, Mondevice covers it, alternative outlets, and there's also Arab outlets that are covering it too. But yeah, literally nothing from what we can find, and I encourage everyone to search for it as well. But nothing from Western media about the declaration of famine in Gaza.
Yeah. And obviously you have the Zionists lying. There's a video that actually we put out today is from CNN, where the I think it's deputy FM of Israel being grilled about the famine in Gaza, the fact that people are starving. And even though there are members of the Israeli cabinet who have time and time again said that they will use the starving of women and children as a strategy to achieve their military aims, uh, she came out and she said they're all lies, they're baseless lies, and they're using figures from the Hamas government, and so therefore we are currently, what we're experiencing now is that even the Western media that attempts to cover for Israel can't keep up with the lies anymore, and so even on CNN, this individual has to get grilled, and it's quite a sight to see. I mean, the the Western media has tried so hard to cover for Israel. You know, you have the BBC trying different things. The BBC, every time someone would come and say that Israel's committing a genocide, the BBC would immediately respond with, "Oh well, but Israel would deny they're committing genocide." Every single time, and of course they wouldn't do that if a Ukrainian was to say that Russia is committing war crimes. They're not going to say, "Oh, Russia would deny they're committing war crimes in Ukraine." It's obvious that the BBC has an agenda. This agenda is for rather, you know, to control what the masses know and think. But the carnage in Gaza has gotten to such a stage that the Zionists have completely lost touch with reality. Uh, they probably what's happening is they know they can't defend what they're doing, so they're just pretending they're not doing it. What kind of sense are you getting from what you're seeing from the Western media, from the Zionist responses, and how things are being uh, spread around?
Yeah, I think like you hit the nail on the head, Faraz. Like it's bonkers, really. Like you see the contradictions from Israel where they say where they openly say this and I know and it's because they have that sense of impunity, right? They can say what they want and they know they'll be helped by what I think is the most powerful tool, which is corporate media. They say that they're going to block all aid to um, and what the reasoning they use is to pressure Hamas, but in that it becomes clear that they are trying to starve a population to pressure Hamas to listen to what they want, which is the total expulsion of Palestinians so that it can be permanently and physically occupied. And you will see though that Western media adopt that line from Israeli military, from Israeli statements and Netanyahu, where they say, and this is like, for example, the likes of Associated Press, as a form of pressuring Hamas, they have restricted all aid. Um, and this is basically taking as fact the Israeli line instead of focusing on the real impact, which is obviously now the civilians, the entire population of Gaza can no longer, no longer have access to food coming in. So, we see this repeatedly being used, and for anything that Israel comes out with, it's almost like Western media is their like PR machine to do cleanup service. So you'll see that, obviously last week, Israel kind of had this cabinet meeting where they declared that essentially, I guess in some forms it's Trump's plan is to say we will be expelling Palestinians from the north of Gaza to south, and we will be permanently occupying Gaza. Obviously, this was something that even a year ago they would never say because it's almost too soon for the world to stomach, but because and this is where I think Western media plays such a key role because they kind of grind away constantly at this idea and normalizing everything that Israel does, and is very gradual, and before you know it, now we're in this position where the unthinkable has become normal, and the way Western media frames this is the intensify military operation. Instead of saying, they have begun occupying Gaza, they will say intensify military operation, or they will say, strikes kill 92 people. This is an AP headline. Strikes kill 92 people as Israeli military operation intensifies. So it's just adopting the Israeli military propaganda, taking it as fact, using very sanitized words, not one headline. Apart from, I think, The Guardian, and I've got the slides. Can I share my screen? I think you.
I think you should be able to.
Let me try. Okay. Oh, I can share screen. Okay. So yeah, hopefully you can see this, but only 4 headlines have included the word occupation from what we've found. So 33 mainstream outlets. I mean, it was widely covered, this announcement of what you can safely call the final stage of the Gaza genocide. Only 4 headlines have used the word occupation, and I guess a lot of these would be surprising, like the Australian and New York Post. And if you actually read the headline, is because they're kind of saying, they then say offensive against Hamas. They're still like horrific headlines that do not capture the truth. No headline mentions the words displace, expel, or remove. This is a big part of what Israel announced very openly to the world. But if none of the headlines that billions consume says these 3 words, how on earth are they going to know the reality? This is just misinformation via omission. You can see The Guardian does kind of allude to it by saying moved. And move is quite literally the friendliest way you can put this. Like you're applying maximum levels, amounts of sanitization. you'll only see these keywords being used by, for example, in this case, like Turkish outlets, an Egyptian like local outlet, and Wafa Agency, which is a Palestinian outlet. Only these outlets are really capturing the essence of what's going on. Imagine if a BBC headline said forcibly displaced population. Like, why can a BBC headline not say that, even though it's the truth, even though Israeli media even is using it? If I skip ahead to this, where Haaretz in its article uses the term occupation of territory. But New York Times, residents caught in the middle. These are it's unfathomable how the Israeli military, the Israeli cabinet can say things so openly, whilst Western media covers it up, even though Israeli media is not covering it up as much. Not to say that Israeli media is good by any stretch of the imagination. But yeah, I think this is exactly what's going on. Western media is coming in, is chipping away at the public, kind of making, essentially, we're living through it, genocide palatable. They make it easy to digest for readers, and they have no clue what's really going on.
Yeah, it's really disturbing to see the stage of gaslighting from Western media at the moment. And with regards to this occupation, uh, I mean, the Western media has pretended that this wasn't the case, or this wasn't like the plan from the get-go. Like, it was the aims from the beginning was what to the stated aims, rather, to release the hostages, supposedly, and to destroy Hamas's military capabilities, and to destroy them as a potential force for things. The only way to do that is to occupy. That's the only way to do it. And they stated these aims in 2023, along with starving the population of Gaza. Going back to that point as well, that's what they said on the 9th of October. Yoav Gallant, then defense minister, came out and said, "We're dealing with human animals, no food, no electricity, no water." And this is exactly how they've conducted themselves. I'd like to
Yeah.
move to the next topic, unless you have something to add.
Well, I was just going to say, I think what's interesting about that as well is you're right, like they were saying it so openly. But do you remember back in those days, even the people that acknowledged that there were individuals in the cabinet that were saying this, they would say, "Oh, this it's a fringe movement. They're the far right. It's not the mainstream Israeli aims." But look, lo and behold, this is the reality we're facing now. So I think this is the dangers actually of saying, even I would go as far as to say liberal Zionism is separate to the Zionism we're seeing right now in the cabinet. Like, they all have the same aim ultimately. It's just one likes to cover it up, whilst the other does it openly. It's essentially the same thing, and we've seen that within 18 months. We've seen that play out.
Yeah, I mean, what is it? There were multiple polls throughout the genocide, one of which stated that over 90% of Jewish Israelis supported what Israel was doing in Gaza. Or actually, so that's 90%. And then I think over 40% wanted more genocide in Gaza. Over 40%. And the rest of it I think there was the right amount of genocide, right? And then, I don't know, like less than 10%, less than 5%, maybe, wanted less, And it just shows you how sick the ideology of Zionism can make a society. It is literally a disease spreading through society, spreading through the society.
Yeah.
When your starting point is that you need to have an ethno state in a land that already has an indigenous population. It's not a member of the race or ethnicity that you're trying to build an ethno state around. Then the only conclusion, if you're going to be successful, is genocide. That's the only conclusion, because the indigenous population are never going to give up their land without a fight. That's just how things operate. That's just how things. Look at any point in history. Look at the Americas, for example. I mean, without, for example, the disease that the Europeans brought, and some internal strife, and the rest, and the wars, the genocidal wars that the Europeans waged against the indigenous population of the Americas. I mean, it's only when the Native Americans became such a small, proportion of those who live in America that they were able to take over fully, and the fighting essentially ceased. But in any colonial enterprise, there's always pushback from the native population. And that's just the way it is. And so, in order for you to be successful, you need to wipe that native population out, and which is what we're seeing here today. And that's why the Israelis are pushing the Palestinians in Gaza to the south, where the only options for them at that time, at that point, is to either leave or die. And this is what Bezalel Smotrich said even before the war. He said, and this is he said about the West Bank, but it clearly applies to Gaza as well today. He said that the Palestinians will have three options. Either they accept that they will be second, third, fourth class citizens on their own land, right? Or they leave, or they die. That's exactly what Bezalel Smotrich said before the genocide in Gaza. And so it's very clear what Zionism does. And let's not forget, right, that Zionism, in its infancy, at least in its variation that birthed the state of Israel, was begun by atheists, left-wing atheists. For a long time, the dominant party in the Israeli parliament, the Israeli Knesset, was the Labour Party. Ben Gurion was, a member of the Labour Party. So it's not about left-wing, right-wing. It's about the ethno-nationalist, Jewish supremacist ideology of Zionism, which in itself is a genocidal ideology. Yeah.
Well said. Yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to move on to I think maybe let's leave India and Pakistan to the end. Stick to Palestine for a little bit. There is a piece of news about the US and Israel devastating Yemen. Attack on Houthis or Houthi-held areas. That's the kind of line that's been adopted by the mainstream media. Could you talk us through? I mean, there's been quite a few development actually with Yemen, especially with the bilateral ceasefire between the Americans and the Yemenis that doesn't include Israel. So maybe we'll touch on that as well. But could you take us through the stuff that you've been looking through for NewsCord?
Yeah, so I think to be fair, I wish I had more time to go a bit deeper into this. But with regards to Yemen, obviously we know that Yemen has been, they already themselves are in a fragile state. It's a lot of them are below the poverty line in Yemen. They still rely on ports for humanitarian aid, and which is why the Israeli and US attacks, especially the nature of the bombardment, their bombardment in Yemen, is so devastating, is because they're targeting specific ports, specific areas where kind of like a lifeline for the Yemenis, and the problem with the way that Western media frames these attacks on Yemen are, they say, aimed at Houthi rebels. This is a direct quote from New York Post. They say, Israeli warplanes bombed the airport in Yemen's rebel-held capital, Sana'a. And this is problematic because what it does is it kind of makes, the capital of Yemen, which I don't know the population, but there will be hundreds of thousands, if not millions, in the capital. It's kind of becomes a bit of it's like a rogue city, a city held by the Houthis, and that's why that framing is so dangerous. Whereas in actual fact, the airport, I think maybe it is completely non-functional now as a result of the bombardment, and it's always framed as a retaliation to a Houthi attack. but they never also frame it as the Houthis doing it in solidarity with Gaza and the genocide that the Palestinians are facing. So it's very one-sided the way that Western media has been covering this. And I think, yeah, this is something you'll see over and over again whenever a Yemen attack is covered, is it will say aimed at Houthis, aimed at rebels, as opposed to talking about, the Hodeidah port has been attacked, where 70% of the aid for the whole of Yemen comes in. You will never see that line being perpetuated at the top of an article from the BBC or New York Times, for example.
Yeah, like you said, the Houthis again, they have said from day one that they're only doing this because there is genocide in Gaza, and as soon as the genocide ends, their attacks on Israel or their attacks on Israeli related ships would end. And again, this is something that, like you said, is not covered by the mainstream media at all. And when it comes to the Houthis, I mean, they're not exactly, angels, by any means, but they have been the only actor to continuously stand with the Palestinian people in Gaza, especially. Um, when the Russians invaded Ukraine, the entire world, or the entire Western world rather, stood with the Ukrainians, and they sanctioned Russia, right? Meaning they cut Russia off from the SWIFT banking system, from Eurovision, from the World Cup, from all of these things, right? Now, when it came to Israel, the world allowed Israel to commit a genocide against a helpless population in Gaza. And we have to always keep in mind that Gaza is occupied Palestinian territory. Israel, before the genocide, had complete control over everything that comes in and comes out, the airspace, electricity, maritime space, the borders, even with Egypt. The Israelis had ultimate say on whether or not those borders would open or close. And so this territory is already under Israeli occupation, which means that Israel has legal responsibilities towards the people that it occupies, which it violates consistently. And let's also remember that on the 6th of October, 2023, at that point, it was the deadliest year on record for Palestinian children in the West Bank. That was on the 6th of October, right? So Israel was already committing crimes against the Palestinians for the last 77 years, and the so-called international community had been allowing that to continue. They've been allowing them to be part of Eurovision, part of the World Cup, the Olympics, etc., etc. So the Houthis, this ragtag group of Yemeni rebels, right, with daggers tucked in their belts, wearing sandals, right? They are the only people or the only group to successfully put sanctions on the state of Israel. Essentially, that's what they did. They put sanctions on the state of Israel. Now, the shipping lanes in the Red Sea have essentially stopped functioning. Right, the insurance for shipping in that region has become so high, and I think almost impossible actually to get insured if you're running a shipping business, to have your ship go through the Red Sea, whilst the rest of the world just watches on. And not only watches on, the Britain and the United States have bombed the Houthis several times, not just the Houthis, but Yemen in general. And again, they're not attacking military targets. They're vast majority of the time they're hurting mostly civilian targets. Recently, they hit a cement factory. It was because they don't know how to get to the Houthis. But essentially, we're at a stage where the entire world is watching on, or abetting and aiding a genocide in Gaza, and the Houthis are outside of Palestine at the moment, are the only ones standing up and actually making I wouldn't say the only ones making a difference, but putting themselves on the line to make a difference. And we've seen multiple videos of Yemenis saying that they would continue despite the bombings of Yemen, of Sana'a, of other areas. They'd continue to fight for the people of Gaza. So it's a very interesting dynamic that we see here. So you have the mainstream media who have continuously covered for the genocide in Gaza. Now, when you compare what the Houthis are doing, how the mainstream media is reporting on how the Houthis have responded to the genocide, and the way they report on how the Western world has responded to Russia's war in Ukraine, you can clearly see a double standard. And if you held the Europeans to the Westerners, the Israelis to the same standards they're holding the Houthis to, we would see a completely different type of coverage of what's going on. I wonder if you have anything else to add on this.
No, but I think not really. But I think what you're saying there is so true. Like in terms of especially the whole reason why America has felt compelled to attack Yemen, seemingly completely contradicting Trump's whole branding as anti-war, where he actually has started started this war as soon as pretty much as he came in as president. Is because of the damage that the sanctions. Essentially, I like that branding of sanctions because it essentially is sanctions, right? They're causing all of the ships to redirect through South Africa, costing so much more money, and ultimately, it has been. I don't know the numbers, but it has been affecting the economy.
I think they bankrupted the Eilat port, so that's the southern port on the Red Sea.
Yeah. So I think this is why America's felt compelled, because they think that an easier solution to this is, instead of telling their friends, their staunch ally, to stop the genocide, they're going to go into a war which has cost them well over $1 billion now. This is the logic, right? This is the hatred. This is how much they're protecting Israel. And I think with that framing, you could pretty much consider that over $1 billion of US taxpayers' money is basically because of Israel, because they refuse to see a real solution in just telling Israel to stop killing children. Ultimately,
we have a final point on Palestine. I think there's an issue with my audio. I want to see if people can tell if I'm too loud, too quiet.
Or maybe I'm too loud.
I don't know how that works, I have to be honest. I blame our producer for any technical issues, because I've got no idea what's going on here.
Yeah, just blame it on him. He can't reply.
Can you guys hear me okay now? Am I loud enough? Do I need to be louder? Well, there's no response, so I'm just going to assume that the sound is okay. Essentially, there is a point. There's one more point on my list here, but I think we've already touched on it. Is the reporting on the killing of 100 Palestinians in one day? Is that something we touched on already?
We kind of touched on it, but I think I do have a graphic if I can share my screen again. And then maybe I could keep sharing my screen if we're going to go on to talking about India, Pakistan. Let's see.
Do you have memes as well on India, Pakistan?
Memes? Nah. I was relying on you for that.
No.
So I think essentially, let's focus on Wednesday, where on that day, so this is 2 days ago, the 24 hours leading up to, I guess, Wednesday, evening time, in local evening time, Israel had killed 102 Palestinians at least within 24 hours. And then, I think what makes it particularly gripping is some of the footage coming out of like the singular locations that were bombarded by Israel, where you can see that, a school in a refugee camp that was housing displaced Palestinians killed 29 men, women, and children. And then, the horrific footage of the bombardment, the Israeli bombardment of a crowded market and like a restaurant in or like a cafe really in Gaza City, killed 23 people, and you can see, that footage. Honestly, like I do hope people really see this and not get desensitized by it, but it is like, really does captures the reality of what Israel is doing in Gaza. And then you've got, the killing of 8 people, including a father, his children, and cousins in Khan Yunis, and it's basically across the strip. There's like Israeli bombing that kills 3 people in one place, but then it kills 30 people in another place. And actually, a minor point on this, by the way, is you will often see that Western media only really focuses on. It's almost like they have like a secret threshold where they will only cover an Israeli bombing if over 30 have been killed, for example, or in cases where the Israeli massacres are particularly like frequent, then they will raise that threshold. It will be like, at some time, sometimes 50 people will be killed in a single bombing, and it will not be reported because there was another bombing where 100 people were killed, and it's almost like they have a quota of how many people how many people need to be killed in order for it to be reported, and a quota of how many times they can report on Palestine within a day, it seems. And I do want to. I think this is like a good comparison to do, because I think it shows how a different headline can evoke so much more emotion. So, for example, this was actually the headline. Sadly, it seems like I have actually memorized it when I was saying it to you word for word. Is strikes across Gaza kill at least 92 as Israel prepares to ramp up its offensive. So, I think to the untrained eye, perhaps this looks like maybe Israel didn't do the strikes, right? It says strikes kill 92 as Israel prepares to ramp up its offensive. So it's almost like it's given like there's a correlation there. Both things are talked about, but it's not Israeli strikes kill or Israel kills really should be the headline, but it's not even Israeli attacks kill at least 92, or in this case Al Jazeera, slightly out of date at that moment in time as the death toll was still piling up. You can see Israeli attacks kill more than 60, but this is actually just strikes. And then kind of the second part of the sentence, Associated Press says, as Israel prepares to ramp up its offensive, Al Jazeera says, as Gaza blockade accelerates, starvation. So one is centered around the civilian impact, around the people and what they're going through. One is literally just adopting a military term, military propaganda, essentially, where Israel themselves are saying we're ramping up our offensive, or we're intensifying our conquest is a word that some headlines have also adopted. And yeah, it makes it sound like a routine maneuver, right? Which is well captioned here. But this one, it sounds like a war crime, and this is the power of media. And by the way, with Associated Press, I cannot overstate how impactful their coverage is, because dozens of outlets, or like maybe smaller ones and even big ones, are plugged in and using their newswire and instantly republishing their headlines and articles. So it goes from even Saudi Gazette, a Saudi Arabian outlet, uses their article, Boston Herald, and the Independent, which is bigger, and even Washington Post has this exact same headline. So if the Associated Press would actually report fairly, it would actually have a huge trickle down effect, and you'd see a lot of Western media would have fairer coverage if Associated Press led the charge on it. But unfortunately, this is they're leading the charge on actually sanitizing the ethnic cleansing. You've got the typical hearsay. This is from the same day, I guess the CNN is focusing on just the attacks on shelters, or maybe it was earlier in the day, hence the lower death toll. 48 hospitals say, this is the hearsay, and then you've got Operation Intensifies, the exact same as Associated Press. You've got, I mean, this is slightly laughable. Like Reuters, they've almost turned into poets in their mission of just diminishing any atrocity and trying to essentially whitewash it or discredit what's really going on. They say medics said twice in one paragraph. They begin with it and they end with it, just so that the user really remembers, oh, okay, the medic said that, so maybe it's not true. And yeah, that's kind of everything I've got to say around what happened on Wednesday, where over 102 people were massacred by Israel.
And how, could you just take us through how you were able to get all of this data, how you were able to get through all of this and analyze it?
Yeah, so kind of the screenshots here you see where, okay, so for example, this is actually from the browser plugin. So like for Chrome extension, Firefox add-on, if you just type in NewsCord, it will come up. And what it does is, once you've got it, you just kind of go on, like, for example, this CNN article, and there will be like a small NewsCord logo on the bottom right. You click it, and it suddenly kind of like overlays with extra information of like, okay, this article you're on, Al Jazeera said this, Middle East Eye said this, here's the differences. If you click on, if you hover over the headline, there'll be like a small NewsCord button. You click it, and then this stuff comes up where it automatically, basically, and it tries to be as fair as possible. It actually looks at the headline and it compares it to its own article, and it says, okay, what things have been said in the article itself that the headline has not necessarily touched on or has not alluded to at all, or have misdirected the reader on. And the reason why we've designed it that way is actually because sometimes you'll see that the article is not that bad, but because editors come in who have the final say on headlines, and they kind of have, obviously, they're operating on strict instructions to sanitize headlines, they will just change the headline, but the article stays the same. So, for example, here, it's clearly found that the article itself is talking about, Israeli attacks, but and it talks about, the I guess more of the reality of what's really going on. But it realizes that, okay, Operation Intensify is not really capturing that well enough. And then it also says omits, context about child casualties. But let's be honest, we're talking about Western media here, so we can't expect that, unfortunately. And yeah, like some of these other, what allows us to really quickly analyze this is because we also use our own app. Like, we use the app that we've created for everyone to use. We use it to see, okay, it's aggregated all of the stories, put it all into one place, and we can see, okay, here's an Associated Press headline, and we just scroll through. That's literally the interface of the app. You just scroll through all of the headlines, and you can see everything side by side.
I mean, that's brilliant, to be honest. I think we need to see more tutorials, to be honest, if of how to use it, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and it's, with the issue is that, I mean, I have to be honest, since the atrocity propaganda that was spread in 2023, 2024 by the mainstream media, I've completely lost all faith in mainstream media, in its ability to report accurately. I mean, I remember when these articles started coming out last year, about whether it's about the 40 babies, or whether it's the mass assault of women, systematic assault. And at the beginning, I was a bit naive. I was like, there's no way that all these mainstream outlets would lie in this way about these are grave accusations. These are like, you don't just lie about them. You don't just spread misinformation like that. And then it all turned out to be false. And we've seen, again, like we've discussed multiple times, the coverage over the last 2 years. It's been completely atrocious. And speaking of just things going on in the last 2 years, just watching scenes from Gaza today, and I'd like for you to chime in on this as well. This is not particularly about the news coverage, but It's just a thought that I had. And seeing how the people of Gaza are living right now, children, you can see every single bone in their body is poking out of their skin, you know, absolutely, completely malnourished. And you see, people in queues to get food, and there's barely enough food to go around. And at this stage, I'm like, I'm not saying I hate myself, but I kind of, I don't know. I hate the fact that I've just been living my life, And obviously, we try, we do things, and it's never enough. It's never enough. But it's just the fact that these people who I identify with because I'm Palestinian, and more importantly, just because I'm human, seeing them like that. And our governments are helping to create this situation, to starve the Palestinian people in Gaza. We can't do much, and we just go on with our lives. And I find it completely unacceptable. But I have no idea what to do about it, if I'm completely honest.
Yeah, I think thank you for sharing that. I think that those feelings you're having is probably what I'd like to think a lot of people are having, but also a lot of people could not care less about, unfortunately. And I guess the little that we are doing, or feels like very little, given what our brothers and sisters are going through in Gaza. We're trying, that's what we're trying to do, show people that, look, there's more to it than what the media is showing you. Look at the reality, look at what these brave journalists on the ground are showing you day in, day out. They're going within minutes to the site of an Israeli massacre, knowing that it's very, very possible, and actually is a known method, that Israel may bombard again, knowing that actually now they're being targeted, that journalists have been targeted for 18 months. They show us that's all they're trying to do, show us the truth, so that the world wakes up, right? But alas, the majority, and I'll share a personal thing where, like, some days I'm just so angered by it, because for those that don't know, I have a full-time job, and I go into, sometimes I have to go into the office, and I'll be in an office, in the office, maybe in the kitchen area, and everyone's having jokes, everyone's laughing, and then the thought flashes in front of me of, like, the people in Gaza, and how they're doing, and what they're going through, the malnourishment, the starvation, the lack of a roof, the lack of water. Their father, their mother, their brothers have been killed, their friends have been killed. There's been no school for 2 years. Meanwhile, everyone here is laughing, living life, not knowing anything, just being completely oblivious to it, either by choice, or because it's because it's easy to just ignore, or because it's been emitted from what the news that they consume, and what they read every day. And it angers me. It feels so unfair, right? Exactly how probably you feel. Or even, like, you look outside, you look at the sky, and it's, or in London it's mostly cloudy, but it's clear. There's no there's no sound of drones, there's no explosion every second. Like, these are things that people here, we take for granted, right? But over there, people are, and this is something that no one talks about, because there's no chance to talk about it really during a genocide. But the post-traumatic, the trauma that these people will be going through. And I know for a fact that the children of Gaza that have evacuated in the early days, when the Rafah border was open, and they're in Egypt, they're now traumatized. At nighttime they can't sleep, because it was at nighttime when their parents, when the child woke up on the rubble and their parents had been killed. So it's like, this is trauma that's going to last for an entire generation, at least, for these children growing up now that did survive the genocide. These things, I think it's easy to become normalized to it, desensitized to it, especially us working as, I guess, kind of, for me, I would call myself like a fake journalist, I guess, trying to just use online material to bring some stuff together. We become, because we're seeing it all the time, you become kind of desensitized to it. But I think it's really important that all of us here, we try to remember that what we have here is so unfair, that we have electricity, that we have a roof, whilst our brothers and sisters are going through what they're going through. It's a terrible injustice.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe that's the important thing to remember, is that I guess everyone's in their place for a reason. We have roofs over our heads, and we have electricity, and we have the internet, we have food, and the only way that we can go about, making sure that all of these privileges that we have are not going to waste is to work as hard as we can for Gaza. And one thing about working for Gaza is that it really, you don't work for Gaza unless Allah has chosen you to work for Gaza. You know what I'm saying? Like all these Arab leaders, right, with their billions and billions of dollars, and all that oil and all that wealth, don't do a single thing. It's not because well, rather, they don't do a single thing because they've not been chosen to do a single thing, because they don't deserve to do a single thing. They don't deserve to be part of it. Anyway, I feel like we can start digressing a little bit here, but obviously the main message is to continue working for Gaza despite how vast the differences are between us, our situation, and their situation.
Yeah.
I'd like to move on to our final story, or final headline news item, which is India-Pakistan. I know you've done some work on that as well. Would you take us through what NewsCord has explored and discovered over the last few days?
Yeah, so I think I don't know if anyone was shocked by India's move to at nighttime bombard several areas in Pakistan and Kashmir. But it was kind of very, very much brewing within actually even Indian media from the days of the Pahalgam, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, the Pahalgam attack, where kind of militant rebels killed 26 tourists or people that were in Kashmir, visiting Kashmir, and what this sparked was immediately the rhetoric that this was a Pakistani-backed attack, that the Pakistani government were involved, and actually it was, the Indian media is kind of a different beast in a sense, compared to Western media, where first of all there's so many of them, there's so many outlets, and some of them were kind of very much pushing for saying that this is a act of war by Pakistan, or is like a declaration of war, and that India must retaliate. And this is certainly, lo and behold, what happened, where India's stated justification for bombarding Pakistan and Kashmir was that this was because they started it in the Pahalgam, the Indian occupied region of Kashmir. There's no evidence that suggests that Pakistan backed the militants that killed the 26 Hindu civilians. They repeatedly denied it, but despite this, you will see that Indian media has said, this is a retaliation for the Pahalgam terror attack. You will see that Western media is also adopting this line almost perfectly. This one really shocked me at the time of the when India first started launching attacks. They also adopted the line. I know it's in quotes, but they're perpetuating very prominently in the headline terrorist infrastructure, and this is obviously what this is taken from from India's military statement, and this is very, very, very similar to the Western media playbook that was used for when the Israeli genocide in Gaza began. So you can see the same techniques being repeated. And actually, ultimately, India killed 31 people, including children, in this bombardment. I think the biggest bombardment since the partition of India and Pakistan. So, or rather, single day attack. And yeah, I think this was really shocking to see. It showed that okay, Western media is aligned with Indian media in this case. This is kind of some new analysis we did where after the kind of the aftermath, it was then seen that actually 2 mosques had been destroyed as a result of the bombardment. There was one mosque in the Pakistani administrated region of Kashmir, and then one fairly deep within Pakistan as well that was destroyed. So I wanted to kind of just show this comparison where Dawn is like, I guess probably the biggest Pakistani outlet out there. And it shows that 3 civilians killed, 2 girls killed. By that they mean children, in a mosque strike. Whereas Times of India says Indian airstrikes on terror bases. They also use the term Pakistan occupied Kashmir. And then you will see that Western media, they've adopted the Indian kind of military statement and the Indian media line, which is these are targeted at terrorist camps. You see Fox News just says it as fact, but I guess what else can you expect from Fox News? You see LBC puts it in quotes. Sky News says India says it targeted in terrorist camps, and so on and so forth. I think the problem with this kind of coverage, by the way, is people will reply probably thinking, oh, but they're saying that India is saying that, but Pakistan is saying something else. Why is what Pakistan has said not being talked about, or indeed the footage that has been seen, or the aftermath? Like the backdrop of this image is a mosque that is a minaret that has now fallen on top of the dome. And okay, that I had a slide here which unfortunately is not included, but that's fine. And another thing that has been revealed as part of this bombardment by India is that actually some of the drones that were used that Pakistan managed to down were Israeli drones and were identified as Israeli drones, and even a source within the Indian government also confirmed that it was some Israeli drones had been used. Only The Independent has actually included this finding in their headline, and even they frame it as an allegation. There's a BBC article that kind of says it or references it deep into the article, but certainly this is not like mainstream, widely covered. They're kind of, I guess, omitting or burying this information, because I think there is a damning link there between what India decided to do this week and what Israel has been doing for 18 months. I think what Israel has been allowed to do for 18 months has broken down so many facades: the facade of international law, the facade of what is illegal and what is legal, and the facade of, even being issued an arrest warrant, it seems. So, India must have been seeing this and obviously emboldened by this, and in fact have the same weapons as they do, or has been supplied those weapons. And it seems like one war crime to another. You prove that you can get away with one war crime, another another place that has ill intent will see this and say, oh, okay, maybe we can get away with this as well. It's shocking stuff, and I think where I'm personally at a point where if you see if Western media is aligned with a certain narrative, then you have to immediately question that. And unfortunately, that's the position we're in now. The fact that Western media is basically mirroring Indian media and leaving out what seems to be clear evidence or footage right before our eyes, I think is that same playbook repeated, unfortunately. And ultimately, I think sadly, who loses out in the end is the civilians, right? It's the Kashmiris who have been through so much war and devastation, and this seems like they're bearing the brunt of it again. So yeah, my thoughts are and prayers are with the Kashmiris and all people and even like the Muslims in India who are now being attacked or being threatened by the Hindu extremist groups. this is all linked, and it's very scary times in the world in general right now. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and like I said, this was a precedent that was created by Israel, and God knows what kind of ramifications it will have for the world going forward. Well, Nima, thank you so much for the brilliant uh, work that you do and the presentation that you gave us today. Very informative and very useful for us to stay up on top of these things, especially with these events that are going on across the world, which might not be directly connected to Palestine, but as you very clearly pointed out, are connected in multiple ways. So thank you. Thank you to all our viewers who joined us today. I'm afraid this is all the time we have. This is all that we have time for this evening. But we are hoping to do this on a weekly basis, in one way or another. Same time, same place, and we hope to see you next time. Take care.
Thanks for
Have a good
having me.
night.
Take care.